guys, and welcome back to Betwixt the Books. I'm sorry that I am just a vaguely glowing white person in a very dark room. I recorded this video once already and got noise gated or something, like my mic cuts in and out, so I'm recording it a second time. So the video quality, not the best. The sun has gone down, but hopefully it will still be a good listen. So if you need to, like, put me on in the background and go do something else while I chat about a book to you. But yes, hopefully this one I don't have any audio problems. Fingers crossed. You get what you get at this point. I can't record it a third time. Watch me now peak all the time because I was messing with my audio stuff. We'll see. I'm here today with a review of Hell's Heart by Alexis Hall. Technically, this was an ARC review that should have come out last week because the book came out last Tuesday. Said I'm talking about it this week, and I'm not super mad about it because it is the start of the Trans Rights Readathon. If you didn't know, the Trans Rights Readathon is running from yesterday, Tuesday the 17th, through the 31st of this month, ending on the day of trans visibility, where hopefully a bunch of creators online will be reading, reviewing, recommending books by trans, non-binary, two-spirit, or generally genderqueer authors, or featuring characters who have those identities as well. Obviously, with the politics of what's going on in America, it makes sense on why we would want to be focusing on this, although Trans Rights Readathon has been happening for a very long time. I will link down below some stuff that's going on. They are also doing some fundraising to help support queer youth. So if that's intriguing to you or you want to learn more about the readathon, that'll be down in the description below. I am here to talk about a book by a genderqueer author featuring a trans protagonist. So I'm supporting. I'm taking part. Here we are with Hell's Heart by Alexis Hall. You may recognize Alexis Hall's name. They are the author of books like Boyfriend Material, which was very popular when it came out, but Gretchen and I also reviewed A Lady for a Duke, I believe last year, which was a trans historical romance. This book is not a romance, so if you are looking for another romance by Alexis Hall, this is not one. They have a very large backlist that you can go and read. This is a sci-fi sapphic retelling of Moby Dick set in space. So if that didn't intrigue you and you're more of a romance person, I totally understand. This is not the book for you. If you are a person that wants to support genderqueer authors or enjoys sci-fi or enjoys retellings of classic novels, this one might be for you. I will have my full review for you here. I don't think you need to have read Moby Dick to read this one, so if that was a question that you had, I don't think you did. This is a pretty one-to-one retelling of the plot of Moby Dick, obviously with very different characters in a very different setting, but like the events of Moby Dick transpire just in this setting with these characters. So you don't need to have read Moby Dick. It does possibly enhance your reading because you sort of understand the conversation that's being had between this book and the original text. I'll talk a little bit about some of those things in this video, but it's not necessary if that was a question you were having before going into it. And if you don't know the basic plot of the story, both Moby Dick and this one, I will talk about it here as well. And I will be spoiler-free up until a point. It being a Moby Dick retelling and Moby Dick being a classic kind of spoils the plot for you. So if you know the plot of Moby Dick, then you know what this one is. In general, Moby Dick is a tragedy. So again, very much not a romance. This has a bad end. And you know that from the beginning of this book. The character tells you, the protagonist of this one tells you from the beginning that they are the only survivor of the tale that they are about to tell. It is told in retrospective. They are writing a book about their experiences throughout the course of the story. So you know from the beginning that this is a tragedy. Not a spoiler, something that you know right away. I'm not going to talk about the most of the minutiae and events that go on, but I'll give you a little bit of the introduction. We start with our character I, as they are discussing needing to get a new job and seeking some sort of adventure. You get the impression that they are a bit of a adrenaline junkie or a person who seeks out extremes. They seem to be obsessed with having new experiences constantly. They also do say that part of the reason why they need another job is that they are in a lot of debt and they need to pay off that debt. The debt is because they had a lot of surgeries. The implication there is that it was gender affirming surgeries that they were able to get, but it was all a lifelong debt that they are then going to have to pay forever. And if they do not pay it, then the folks who did those surgeries will come and repossess their body parts. Love a dystopian future. That's where we're living in. I winds up in a inn in a port city where a bunch of the folks who work harpooning, killing, bringing back leviathans, giant space creatures that fly through the seas of Jupiter, go out to do that, come back in order to get and process their cerebral spino fluid to use to power all of the space stations and colonies across the galaxy that the humans have colonized. You learn that Earth has pretty much been stripped of all resources, and that any humans that were left behind, at least based on the religion that I grew up in, were murderers, cannibals, bad people who didn't deserve to be taken away from Earth. Which is a shock to them because they then wind up sharing a room and a bed, literally, with a Terran, or a person from Earth, who they will name only as Q throughout the story. I and Q decide to pair up, as Q is a harpooner, in order to find a ship to work aboard. They wind up on the Pequod, which is the same name of the ship as the ship in Moby Dick, and the ship is captained by A, another person whose name has been taken away just to their first letter, and A is obsessed with hunting the mythical white Leviathan that they are apparently still recovering from having just lost their leg, and most of their crew in the last trip that they went out in. Same with Moby Dick. A is obsessed with finding this white Leviathan and bringing it down to the detriment of the entire crew. Again, we know from the beginning of the text that I is the only survivor of this quest. You then obviously follow the adventurer as they go through it to find this white Leviathan and all of the different relationships that I has throughout this. One-to-one, exact same plot as Moby Dick. Well, some of those characters have lost their names, I being a stand-in for Ishmael, Q being a stand-in for Queequeg, and A being a stand-in for Ahab. Other characters are named, but while in the original text most of their names were allusions to biblical characters, in this text there are allusions to writers and modern philosophers. Like the owners of the ship are named as Emerson and Thoreau, Henry David Thoreau and Ralph Waldo Emerson. Might recognize those. There's also Locke and Lovejoy and all of these other like modern philosophers and writers. This is not a college essay, but I could definitely go on a bunch of discussions about the way that those characters and namesakes that are chosen for them have implications on the themes of this book. This is just a book review, so I'm not going to get into it, but I have thoughts. Let me just say that I have thoughts about that. Much like Moby Dick, there are long stretches of this text that are focused on the anatomy of the Leviathans and the different hierarchies they have, and the descriptions of like where they live on the planet and why you would want to go after one type of Leviathan versus another type. Very similar to Moby Dick in the way that whales are described. There are long sections talking about the ship and the ways that it runs. Again, very similar to Moby Dick. But you will note that this text is significantly shorter than Moby Dick, and I think that's because a lot of that has been condensed in a way that is better than the original text. I feel like a lot of people will be turned off by how technical Moby Dick is in a lot of ways, and while this is a sci-fi, I think it lands more firmly in the action-adventure section than it does in, like, the long stretches of, like, scientific mumbo-jumbo. So while it does still exist, and those sections are still there, they are much reduced when compared to the original text that it is a retelling of. I will say it is very heavy-handed in its themes and allegories, though. And me, 5 years ago, probably would have had more of a complaint about this than I do currently, because a lot of what it is saying, as most, like, dystopian sci-fi does when it talks about the ways that our current society is on a particular trajectory and will end up in a specific place. This one is no different. Again, like I said, Earth is very much described as having been stripped from all natural resources. There's no precious metals, there's no oil, they have no energy or ability to create new technology there. So then humans go and colonize other places and strip them of their resources. Anybody who has issues with colonization and capitalism will understand those themes very much. There is also very long sections discussing religion and the ways that Christianity has splintered and fractured in this more modern society. I grew up in a sect that is very materialistic and individualistic focused. There is a section where they go to a church that has like teleprompted sermons going constantly, and the only thing that you need to get in there is to pay money for it. And it's very obvious that you sort of pay your way to heaven in this society. They want you to work very hard and then to give as much money as you can to the church. Folks that are aware of like big mega churches in the US will sort of see the way that that is paralleled and extrapolated towards a very extreme version there. There is another section of the religion, or like a different religion, but they all stem from Christianity, it seems, that is very much centered around the fact that any clump of living cells is considered its own organism, to the point that where doctors who take out cancer from an individual have to then keep that cancer alive as its own entity, which is very expensive. Again, capitalism is a big theme here. And if a doctor were to do that and throw away the cancer cells, then they are essentially murdering a person. Again, very clear allegories to that and the way that discussions on abortion are currently being had. And then there are other discussions of even more extreme religions where they are based on how white you are, and that they don't talk to people outside of their community, and that they believe that they're like a doomsday cult where the devouring god is going to come and eat everyone, but they will eat them last because they have stayed pure, and that their pureness is based on how white of skin they have. And again, not very subtle with these themes. You see what I'm talking about. There are other ones that are brought up throughout the course of this, but themes of capitalism, religion, and the effects that those have, as well as propaganda. And while I does not realize the extent to which they have been propagandized throughout their life, or the society that they are in, we are meant to see it as the readers, and understand it. And again, it's heavy-handed. It is obvious, all of this. And again, 5 years ago, that would have bothered me more than I think it does now. I am much more realizing that there are a lot of people who need it to be that obvious, to understand the themes and to pick up on what it's, trying to say. Do I think necessarily the audience who is already going to pick up a genderqueer book about a trans character is the audience that needs it made that plainly? Maybe not. But clearly some people do need it laid out that plainly for them. So I'm not that mad at it. And it wasn't so much that it bothered me throughout the course of the text. I was much more engaged with the allegories and things that were being said, based on the naming systems, as well as the action and adventure that you get through the different scenes of actually going out and trying to fight and kill and bring back leviathans. When it comes to the characters of this book, I very much loved Q. Q is my favorite character. Q being a stand-in for Queequeg in the original text. Queequeg very much was an outsider, and in the original text was meant to be originally viewed as a cannibal and a savage because they were represented by an indigenous culture. It's thought that they were meant to be sort of inspired by Maori culture. They had a lot of tattoos, face tattoos in the original text. And while, again, originally all of those characters thought that they were savage or less than technologically advanced than the other characters, it is shown throughout the text that they are actually one of the more philosophical, kindest characters in the book. Same thing here with Q. Q is seen to be very thoughtful. Q speaks in Latin throughout the course of this book, and while I is not interested at all in translating that for you, you can either, sort of try and muddle through based on context clues or understanding through cognates, or do what I did and just have Latin to English pulled up in another tab while you're reading to understand what they're saying. It is one of the reasons why, while I did listen to the audiobook along with reading the arc that I had, I do think that you should have a physical copy with you, unless you're able to transcribe Latin from just listening to it, because you will lose something in not knowing what Q is saying, which I think I also would lose something in not understanding what Q is saying. Q is very thoughtful, and the things that they are saying have more poignancy and poetry to them than a lot of what I says. Again, representative of Queequeg, very much so. So highly recommend having that available to you. I is very much an interesting character in that they are openly describing themselves as depressive, as seeking novel experiences. They seek sex constantly, but run away from attachment. Even though they do build a very strong bond with Q throughout this text, they don't have a strong opinion of themselves and therefore don't want to bring other people down, but then they do entangle themselves in the lives of these other characters. Just in the way that they have a relationship with Q, they also have a relationship with A, or the Ahab stand-in, and you get to see a very up close and personal view of the mental spiral and obsession that A has throughout the course of this text, to the detriment of literally everybody else in the text. And you get to see the dichotomy between their relationship with Q, who is very much focused on a future and on like kindness and goodness, and is only doing this because they want to bring back what all of these folks see as trash, but has very important materials that Earth no longer has. They want to bring back home, versus A, who is very much going on a suicide mission that they know is a suicide mission and does not care who they bring down with them. The dichotomy between the relationships in all of these characters is great, and I loved it. And I think that Alexis's time writing romance let them write characters really well. I think that's one of their strong points as a writer. And it's no different in this book at all. I think at the end of the day, I'm going to wind up giving this like 4.25 stars. I quite enjoyed it. Again, it's a tragedy, so be prepared for that. Like, if you know the plot, you know the plot, and that's what it is. But it was very much enjoyable, and I do think that in a lot of ways it was an improvement on the original text, and was able to take the conversations that Moby Dick had that are very much still relevant to today's society and modernize them and bring them forward to make even more sense, and be even more poignant as it is in today's society, because a lot of the conversations that were had in that book are very much still applicable today. If you are looking for a sci-fi take with gender non-conforming and trans characters, definitely a good one. It's action adventure more than like space opera, and while it is set with a dystopian society, it is not a dystopian at its heart. It very much is just a tragedy. A parable of human hubris, if you will, and I think it did a good job. I think it improved on a lot of things from the original text. It did a great job of modernizing it. And again, you don't need to have read Moby Dick to read this one. I think you will enjoy it just as much, and it may actually help open the door for someone who wants to go back and read the original text, which I think retellings do really well. It's one of the jobs that they do, and that they make the older texts more comprehensible when you go back to them. You can recognize these scenes in an older language, in an older syntax, maybe. So yes, I enjoyed it. Again, 4.25 stars from me. So if you're thinking about it, I do recommend it. Gretchen has spent the week doing dissertation boot camp, where she's doing that all the time, so her brain is wiped. I don't know if she's going to have the time to have a review for you for Monday. I also have an arc that I'm trying to review for next week. We'll see if I can do that one on time. No promises, but if both of us fail you on an individual count, we will have a reading roundtable for you next Friday, which I hope you are ready to enjoy, where we tried to predict some 5-star reads. It will be a good time. I hope that for that one, and if not, I will see you at some point, either individually or together with other folks. I hope you are having a good time. And if you have any sci-fi, gender nonconforming, and trans reads for me, please leave them down in the description, because I read queer books all the time and I'm always looking for more recommendations. And I will talk to you again soon.